Welcome to the Sheffield Sunday Asbel Season meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Biddy C from Idaho, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing or if you'd like to ask a question. Thank you, Biddy. It is wonderful that you're here, and the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to set my timer. Might not make the 40 minutes and I might make, way over. So it's good to have a little guide. Oh, it's good to be here. Hi, everybody. My name is Miss Biddy. I am a recovered alcoholic. Never thought I'd be able to say that. My home group is called AA on the Rocks. I'm in Area 18 of District 4 in the United States, western part of the United States, in the high desert, lots of sagebrush and wind where I live, and sand. I have a sponsor. I sponsor other alcoholics. At my home group, I have a job, and I'm loyal to my home group. I'm dedicated to doing the work there, and that has proven to give me lots of exercise in the spiritual realm, right? Nothing's wasted in God's economy. I like to mention, if you're new, and if you're not new, that I live in the disciplines of steps 10, 11, and 12. You can, put it that way. You can also say, my sponsor says this, and it's true too, where I'm actually being disciplined by them. The 12 steps, actually the last three, the growth and maintenance. And so this is why this reading is, just so beautiful. This page 8 from As Bill Sees It, where I just set my book down. He says, regardless of worldly success or failure, regardless of pain or joy, regardless of sickness or health, or even of death itself, a new life of endless possibilities can be lived. And then there's a little word, if, and that's circled in my little As Bill Sees It. It's circled, if I'm willing to continue my awakening through the practice of AA's 12 steps. It's a practice. It's a lifestyle of practice. And it's a concept that was lost on me for the longest time. I want to do a step and put it behind me. I always want to get stuff and I'll hear it, and one of the things that's most beautiful about sponsoring people is you hear yourself. I don't know, I shouldn't say you, is I hear myself coming out of their mouth, and it indicates, like, oh, look at that, and because I've been there, I can recognize for them that you might be headed for trouble. They might be headed for trouble. And so this spiritual awakening that must go on is happening as a byproduct of living in the disciplines of steps 10, 11, and 12, and this completely different angle. In the 4-step process, the directions of the 4th step, it says, I'm willing to look at stuff from an entirely different angle. When I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 27. I mean, imagine being 27. I'm 63 years old today, and I can't even believe I survived what Bill called the overconfidence of youth, right? Oh my God. I've got a dog right now. He's about a year old, and he's just a doofus, man. He hurts himself constantly. His enthusiasm so far outweighs his ability that he, on the daily, injures himself. All right. The good thing, though, about the dog is he seems to roll with it better than I ever did, and he seldom blames me for it. And when I was injuring myself, I was blaming you for it, and I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't done that. And all the peace in my life was contingent on external circumstances. I did not know. Man, I'd been to the shrinks, I'd been to the counselors, I'd been those places where they're trying to tell me what's wrong with me. But nobody said that my problem came, from me. The big book says this. My problems arise from me. And see, I thought they came at me. And that's, not only it is an entirely different approach to life. One of my favorite readings, you'll notice that I wear the keys on my neck. I have them almost constantly. I was recently in Italy and I have one now. I have a replica of the key to the Sistine Chapel. I'm gobsmacked being inside. I'm just a little redneck from a little town in California, a mountain town, never been anywhere, done anything. And I truly being able to go to these places, been to Scotland, been to Ireland, sat in front of the tombstone that Bill stood in front of, had my picture taken with my friend Jonah, right? We're sitting there and we're holding our books. It's just a beautiful adventure. I digress. I'll wear the keys because one of those stories in the back, the keys of the kingdom, and the key continues to be willingness. And I know it's popular in Alcoholics Anonymous today to say the how of the program. And then we want to say honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And that's nice. I don't want, if that's nice. But it's not what our literature says. Our literature has it in a different order. And willingness is always going to precede. If you look in the back in the spiritual experience, it says we can only be defeated, right? An attitude of belligerence, intolerance, belligerent denial. And it says that the principles that are essential are willingness, honesty, and open-minded. And it says it in that order. And the acronym is WHO. Right? The path is the how, the steps. But the acronym for that is WHO. But I'll tell you straight up, my ability always exceeds my willingness. So I need to focus on this thing called willing. Am I willing to continue? So before, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, not it, what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. And so I generally, if I've got 40 minutes, I might as well go back and forth, right? What I used to be like is not like what I am now. I'm not perfect. I certainly vacillate between, some things, but today I have a God-guided life. I loved it. I saw a gentleman in here earlier. His name started with a D, and he was driving, and he had a virtual background, and at the top of his virtual background, it said the drunk squad. And I always know I'm in good company when I see those little clues that alert me to somebody that might know the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and the well from which we sprung. It's deep. That well is deep. I don't have my I don't have my book Language of the Heart open, but there's a really great article in there that Bill published in the grapevine on clergy. And it just starts out, the well from which we sprung was handed to Bill by none other than Reverend Sam Shoemaker. And it's a beautiful, the way our history unfolds is absolutely beautiful. And I can go on about that, but I'm not going to, because the topic is page 8 of As Bill Sees It. And I did have an extra cup of coffee. So I'm going to be going off in some tangents. The gist of this is that my internal circumstance cannot be contingent on external things. And it always was. And we have some tragedies right now in my family. One of them's real big. And, at least I see it as tragedy because I'm short-sighted human being. But I have a very dear, close family member that has this thing called metastatic melanoma. And those two words together are 95% death sentence. This woman's 40 years old. She's got children. She's active in her church. She's a beautiful soul, an absolutely beautiful soul. And that's why this reading today means so much, because here's what she said. Because people, we're careful not to pray for outcomes. I can't say we, I can only speak for me. I don't necessarily pray for outcomes. And so, we all want our own way. People want their own way. I want my own way. And I have to tell you that this further down the road, I'm not 27 anymore. I've been practicing this for a while. And this development of the sixth sense that it talks about, the sixth sense, that is spiritual vision. And spiritual vision is only made sharper in adversity. So here's my family member. Her whole church is praying for healing. Okay. Her friends, her family. And you know what she says? It's a 40-year-old woman. I was eating library paste at 40. I swear to God, I was just dumb as a buck, right? But we grow. This woman says, she says, but honey, I'm already healed. All I have is cancer. And she doesn't have the big book of alcohol. She doesn't have somebody that needed to tell her to look at this from an entirely different angle. She simply has a relationship with God, and she's not afraid. I don't want it, right? Look, I don't want it. But read this. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Regardless, I'm going to repeat it, regardless of worldly success or failure, regardless of pain or joy, regardless of sickness or health or even death itself, a new life of endless possibilities can be lived if we're willing to continue. And it seems to me like the people with the greatest hardship are the people with the greatest vision. And I always, I want to be like a spiritual giant, but I don't want to get it the way my friend, I don't want that. So I'm always busy running the show. All boils down to that in my evening review and my, during the course of my day when I'm taking step 10 all day as a way of life. I think that I know a little bit about this thing called the lotus flower. Raise your hand if everybody. It's just this flower that continues to come up. It's like an artesian well, and I know there's writings in. I keep looking down here because my language of the heart is there, and this is truly the language of the heart. These publications that Bill wrote for the Grapevine are really, really, really beautiful. And I take them slowly and savor them and read a letter at a time. And this excerpt, somewhere he talked about that. It's an artesian, it's a never ending, and the source is from within. That's the whole thing, is the kingdom of God is within. Somebody very famous said that. So in the spiritual experience in the back of the book where it says we have tapped into an unsuspected inner resource. Unsuspected. Why is it unsuspected? Well, because I'm looking for something outside and for something that I had within all along. It's like one of those moments where, if you've ever seen The Wizard of Oz, where, there's no place like home. And I'm mad at God. I think I've been treated unfairly, which, could be true if you grew up in alcoholism. Look, unfortunate things happen in families as the result of alcoholism, directly related to being raised in an alcoholic home. And so those things, we have a step 4. Initially it's step 4, but later in step 10, in that one paragraph, it says continue 4 times. And it's that whole beautiful 4 paragraph, step 10 encompasses 4 through 9 as a way of life, not an episodic response to discomfort, but a continual calling from God. In that initial 4th step, I had a person tell me that it's a necessary indulgence into victimization so that I can get clear of resentment. And so I recognized, I really am troubled sometimes when people are looking for their part in something. Well, what was your part? Because I get down to those things. It's like I didn't have a part in any of that. I had an STD by the time I was 7 years old. So what am I going to do about the resentment? So I didn't have anything to do with the occurrences that happened in step 2. I had no part in that, but I have 100% responsibility to treat the resentment that I have over that. 100%. And so what happens in my 4th step when I took it initially, because I still do it, the steps lose their numbers. The numbers fall away. And so I've gone from calling it a 4th step, which I'll do because there's probably new people here, and just continue to call it a personal inventory. I continue to take a personal inventory, and I look specifically for 4 things: selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, which, by the way, for the history enthusiasts, are the opposites of the 4 absolutes. Anybody that says Bill didn't like the 4 absolutes has not studied it carefully enough, right? We aim for perfection. I fall short, certainly, but aiming for perfection. So I did this necessary indulgence into victimization and became willing to look at that from an entirely different angle and recognize that the people that had harmed me. And I love this beautiful language at the bottom of page 66, right? I realize that the people who had harmed me, nobody said they didn't harm you, Biddy, right? I thought somebody was going to say, no, right? The people that harmed me were, and there's a little comma and the word perhaps, really gently just here, just drop this in your thoughts, spiritually sick. I'm like, I never ever gave spirituality a fair hearing at all. But it just seemed like in that moment when I'm looking at that prayer, maybe spiritually sick, and they're telling me that I'm spiritually sick and they're spiritually sick. And all of a sudden, right there in my 4th step, in between these columns, in between column 3 and column 4, all of a sudden, the entire human race became ill rather than bad. And so for me, that was a ticket to freedom. People, I only had them categorized as being bad. There was bad people and there was good people. And by the way, I was a good people because I was going to be one of those self-righteous little Karens. I love our internet sensation named Karen, because that's what I think about today when I'm, taking inventory today. And I just call it, and I will say it to sponsees too, unleash your inner Karen. What did they do? What did they say? And, I've got this thing pointing the finger and over there, over there, over there. And I thought that external circumstances caused my internal strife. And so it just turns the whole lens around. I walked into inventory quite the victim, as I had been, but as I came out the other side, it's like, so I going into a little machine. My sponsor calls it the machine. Put it in the machine. It comes out the other side completely different than what it went in. I went in a victim. I came out a perpetrator. While I may not have exactly harmed the people that had harmed me, as the result of how I reacted to that harm, harmed a whole bunch of people that were never involved in the original, I'll call it the original sin, the original experience, also the original clog in the drain, right? Because I'm supposed to be facing and getting rid of the things that block me. And it says resentment is the number one. Resentment blocks me from the sunlight of the spirit. And when I live in the dark, just like the people that harmed me were living in the dark, I harmed a lot of people, mainly my husband. I really feel, my first husband paid dearly for everybody that had ever hurt me. I just was vicious toward him. And I gave as good as I got. I kind of always wanted to be a victim there too, because let's face it, self-pity and victimhood that's a strong defense. I can go to victim, martyr, just like that. And there's only a handful of people in my life today that call BS on that. Everybody else is going, oh, poor you. And it's like, yeah, that doesn't work. I'm a real alcoholic, a real one. And that has a tendency sometimes to offend people. And it's like, well, then what am I, a fake one? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm placed beyond human aid. I can't afford that kind of resentment, even when it's little. And so going back to this idea of adversity being my friend, looking at it from an entirely different angle. Oh, incidentally, in that initial fourth step, what had happened was there stopped being a separation between me and everybody else, and it was in one fell swoop. It was all of a sudden, like Bill said, the scales of prejudice and pride fell. They just fell, and I could see and sense and experience. I don't know how to describe this, but all of a sudden there was no me versus them. There was only us, which mean the human beings joined to the human race, us and him. In that third step experience, it says if you're sincere about the position, the top of page 63, if I'm sincere about this position, remarkable things will follow. And I was very sincere. And all of a sudden, there was a freedom that I had never known, ever. I was free from the resentment as a byproduct. And I'm going in that prayer. They, like ourselves, were sick too. Harry Tiebout talks a little bit about the alcoholic and the narcissistic personality of the alcoholic. And, if you're a real good, expert wanting to find out what's wrong with all those people, Google that. Empathy turns out to be the kryptonite for the narcissistic personality, which I have in that beautiful prayer at the top of page 67. Mind you, the only resentment prayer that AA has in our 12-step process is located on page 67. They, like ourselves, right there, empathy, hypocrisy, all of that. And it dissolved the resentment. It dissolved the I'm different, I'm better than you. And I just gave up. That's the key to freedom right there, is to stop blaming. Sometimes, and the practical application of this lifestyle, of the use for God. I didn't know any of that. The practical application is in that prayer. And it just changed everything. I've heard some speakers, it's the change that changes everything. And when I changed, and I didn't do this, remember those 10-step promises, they don't say I placed myself. They say we are placed in a position of neutrality. This happened to me as the result of taking actions I did not believe were for me or would even help. I didn't understand what AA's solution had to do with my problem until later on, till I had that awakening. It was almost a road to Damascus thing. Man, it was just all of a sudden. One, I'm not alone. Two, you guys, the world and the people in it's not hostile anymore. I'm a small part of something really big, but mostly I'm not alone. It says that in, my friend Jack is here, and something he said yesterday just really, really sparked me. It says we're given the keys of the kingdom. There's no more ache inside the heart of the alcoholic that nothing before could touch it. The ache is gone, and it need never return again. It'll return if you're new. It can return. But now, having been taught how to take this inventory, I know that my path to freedom always is going to be about humility, and because I'm the one that's but I want, and it's hard. It's hard because it seems so harsh, but I want, and sometimes God's a little bit, I don't know, maybe he's got a sense of humor. Maybe he's got the sarcastic streak, or maybe that's mine. But a little voice says, Biddy, nobody asked you. Right? The 3rd-step prayer, I got a sponsor. He'll do it. Right? I'm whining about God knows what. And he said, you've taken step 3, right? Wait. Oh, right. It takes what it takes. And so once I've taken the 3rd step, the rest of my life is no longer my business. I'm in the world to play the role he assigns, capital H. Oops, my phone is on. So there's another little place. Yeah, that's hard. I want to focus on that. I'm in the world to play the role he assigns. And I want to run the show. And it isn't that I never get what I want. Because today, almost 100% of the time, I get what I want. Well, why would that be? Because what I want is not what it used to be. What I was like was I want what I want when I want it, and nothing else will do. And in God's world, you get what you get when you get it. And it's always more than what I need. And so when I put that other lens on, I got new glasses, I have new vision, a new way to look at stuff, my angle of approach, where Keys of the Kingdom are really clear. And in my book, it's on page 311. I think in the 4th edition, it's page 274. She says an entire change takes place in our approach to life. I don't wake up in untreated alcoholism, 10 and 11 and 12. I go to bed having asked God's forgiveness, and I wake up on awakening, consider the plan for the day. I stay in this beautiful, beautiful language and very clear cut, very precise. And I'm always going to say the ticket to freedom whether you call it a ticket, I don't know, a key, but it's in my pocket. My freedom isn't in your pocket. If my freedom's in your pocket, then I'm sunk until you change, and that holds you hostage. I don't think it's an accident. The letter the excerpt came from is one called The Greatest Gift of All. And it says the greatest gift that can come to anybody is a spiritual awakening. Without a doubt, this would be the certain verdict of every well-recovered alcoholic in AA's entire fellowship. And so he says, what is this then, this transforming experience, and how can we receive it, and what do we do? Right? How, what do you mean? What do I do? Well, go back to page 60 and read from there. What do you mean? And what do I do? Every time Bill asks a question in the big book, he answers it. First of all, I need to be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. I drove it over the cliff and into the ground. So then the next thing he says, here's the how and the why of it. First of all, quit playing God. I didn't know how I played God. None of that. And the more I read that beautiful stuff, the more, wow, that all I do is play God. The only difference is today I may catch it a little bit sooner. I don't harm as many people. I try not to harm any at all. I can go through whole days and months even without needing to make an amend. Absolutely amazing, right? It says, before I begin. Sometimes my husband, maybe I'll backtrack on that. Sometimes I will have to say, oh, okay, yes, sorry about that. You're right. And be quiet. Let the man finish a sentence for Pete's sake. Right? So on the next page, it's no accident. I wanted to say this because I can't finish a thought either. It's no accident that in Language of the Heart, this article, this letter called The Greatest Gift of All, is followed immediately by The Next Frontier, Emotional Sobriety. And as a matter of history, which is important sometimes, the Emotional Sobriety letter was published in the Grapevine in 1958, but it was written in 1953. So, Bill struggled mightily with, this thing called depression, and his ticket to freedom and was this thing called unconditional love. He talks about being willing to give the kind of love that he saw St. Francis. Again, it's counterintuitive that it's better to love than to be loved. But damn it, it is good to be loved. But it's better. So good, better, best, right? And so this idea of keeping an open channel, fear clogs it, that blockage from the sunlight of the spirit. And I continue to take a personal inventory, continue to set right any new mistakes, turn my thoughts to someone I can help. That's not always somebody in AA, but frequently it is. I do have kind of a pack of sponsees to be available for, and that'll show you. If that doesn't show me how my selfish nature of my time and my everything, none of it's mine. And I have my sponsor's voice in my head that says, Biddy, you've taken step 3, right? We need to remind each other of that commitment. And I want to close with this concept. And it's on page 235 of language of the heart, in the same letter, the greatest gift of all. He says, as I slowly learned acceptance, my pain subsided. I began to wake up and look around. I began to see, this is a guy that, I suggest you read the whole letter, but this is a guy that was searching for riches, chasing worldly clamor. He was new to AA, and here's what he came away with. As I slowly learned acceptance, my pain subsided. I began to wake up and look around. I began to see that my modest job was a means of living and of serving society, and the bigger and the better job could no longer be my chief aim. Then I looked at AA. What had I done for the fellowship, capital F by now, that had saved my life? Mighty little, I had to confess. So I began to go to meetings with a very different attitude. I quit my envy of the financially well-heeled AA and listened closely to what they had said. And I learned that their money was no longer a symbol of prestige. It was a trust for the best use to which it could be put. They also showed me that the temptations of riches could sometimes be worse than the pains of poverty. I also found, and here's where it's in italics. I also found that there is no such thing as an unfortunate AA. That is, if he were a real member. Ooh, now that might trip your trigger, huh? Are you a real member? Have you found the sufficient substitute? It doesn't say of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says in. Home group, a job there, living in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, regular meetings regularly, sponsoring others, bringing this message back. And so he says, no such thing as an unfortunate AA if he's a real member. If sick, he was by fine example and inspiration to those both sick and well. If poor in pocket, he could often be rich in spirit, an eager worker and servant of our society, capital S. So what used to be the hunch or an occasional inspiration has gradually become a working part of my mind. Things come from my soul. It's out of the heart that things come. And heart isn't even deep enough. It's from the soul, of a soul sickness. And Alcoholics Anonymous treats that. Physical sobriety becomes a byproduct. Placed in a position of neutrality, byproduct. All of it is byproduct. And so I like to stay in that, stay in the flow, right? I don't have to have the wheels fall off today before I make corrections. I'm a big fan of the four absolutes, big fan. The same as the old ship's navigators before we had real navigation. Modern, rather, I'm not going to say real. Before we had modern navigation, the sailors used the North Star as their guide. None of the sailors thought they would reach the North Star. It's only the guide. And so the absolutes, I aim for the middle of the bullseye, and this is in the 12 and 12 in step 6. The one that separates the men from the boys. And that is when I aim for perfection, at least when I miss, I'm falling in the right, I'm stumbling my way, right, into joy. Joy that is not contingent on external. So I'm going to stop there. because my time is up. I could go on, but I'll give someone else an opportunity. Thank you for listening.